Welcome everybody to Red G Fox. And on this channel, we do episode breakdowns and we do fun facts and we do everything Sanford. And today's episode breakdown is on the Dowry. Honestly, I would have probably forgot the name of the episode. I've seen it. I know about Grady. I remember the first time whenever I would hear this, I'd be like, hey, is that the same Grady? Did they change the actors? No, they did not. So if you're new to the channel or you're new to Sanford and Son, this is not the Grady that we all love, but he's still great in this. It's his cousin Grady. So let's just get right to it. As we get into the scene, I want to, hold it, hit the brakes. I do want to say the last live show we had went for over an hour and 10 minutes, and I loved every minute of it. We had a good number of people who came out. We all watched it together. We chatted. It was very fun. So the plan is this Saturday, we're going to do it again, 8 o'clock, Saturday evening. This week, coming week, if you're watching this, we will do it where I watch it live, you watch it live from your home, streaming or DVD, and then we comment and watch the whole thing. It's great, and we're going to be doing the episode with Osgood when he comes to visit the patient from season 2. Someone requested that. I want to say it was, who requested that? Anyways, we had maybe Jessica. Somebody requested it. We're going to do that one. So join us if you can this Saturday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for that. And we'll also slip in a second episode. We do 2, and we chat, and then we talk between episodes. It's great fun. If you do love Sanford and Son, if you like a community, if you like to talk and hang out with people, this is the channel for it, right? Because we're going to do that. Not every week, but we will get several times a month. And like I said, the last one was a blast. I had a great time. So let's get into the episode, the Dowry. In this one, as soon as Lamont pulls up, he comes and Fred's excited. He comes out and Lamont's like, hey, you know, what are you so excited for? He's like, hey, I got Cousin Grady coming on. Lamont's like, well, I'm sorry, I got a date. And Lamont wants to go on a date. And Fred's begging him. He's like, you know, please, can you stay? I got my Cousin Grady coming. And he's married. He's got a new wife. And he's got a new stepdaughter. And it'd be great if you could meet him. And before he's like, I got things. I got a date. He's like, here, look at these. Let me show you a picture of your Cousin Grady. Or your Uncle Grady, because he hasn't seen him. It's Fred's cousin. And as he sits down and he opens it, and it's a top 5 funny when he goes through it. He's like, oh, there's your Aunt Jenny. Aunt Jenny, yeah, you know, she married a man named Uncle Tip. Was it, what was his name? Uncle Tips. Uncle Tips. And Uncle Tips, you know, during the Great Depression, he had a wooden leg. And so he worked at the park. And so what he'd do is he took the wooden leg. And I love Lamont's face. You can see it right here where he's kind of doing he's already grinning because he knows what's coming. But he said he would sharpen the wooden leg, and then he would walk and pick up paper like that. And Fred even does the limping. It paints such a good visual of where he would pick up trash with his leg. Just by Fred describing it, we can all see it, and it's hysterical. And then he said he ends up filing it down so much, eventually he was too short and uneven, and he lost his job. But then we also get to Uncle, what was it? Oh, Uncle Toot. Uncle Toot, he was an actual chef on the Titanic, and Fred even says he never got a chance to cook. Obviously, we know why. And Lamont's like, well, you cut it out. So he finally, and then we get the picture of Lamont in the photo album. I wish we could have seen these, right? Nowadays shows, they actually bust out pictures of the real actors as kids. Even I Love Lucy did that. They had actual pictures of Lucy and Ricky as children in there. That would have been fun to see a picture of Lamont or Damon Wilson as a kid. And Fred says, you know, another top 5 funny, he's like, man, you were one of the ugliest babies ever. He said, you were so bad. And then Lamont's like, well, wait a minute. Shouldn't I take after the father? Like, you know, you're basically saying you're ugly. And Fred's like, no, actually, most people thought you took after the bear because he was on a bear rug, a bearskin rug. He says, the bearskin rug was better looking than Lamont was as a baby. We've seen those babies sometimes that aren't the cutest in the world. And apparently Lamont, I don't know if Fred's so negative with everything in life. Who knows if that's even factual. So he does convince him. He convinces Lamont. Lamont is a nice guy. He's like, all right, you know, I don't want you to feel you're entertaining family, and I'm not here, so I'll stay. And they're about to clean up, and then they show up, and he opens the door, and in comes Margaret. That's his Cousin Grady's new wife. We'll get more on her later, but she comes in, very nice, and we know she's been on Sanford and Son before as a different character later on down the road. And then in comes Grady, and he gives give me 5, you know, and then he slaps him. He said, I'll give you 2. And then they start doing their dance, the Susie Q. They're busting out their old school dances. I love that part because Fred frequently does this. Remember, he does it when he's got the 2 girls from Detroit on the one where he wanted to take a trip to Catalina, and he meets them and he starts showing them the trucker. The truck, you know, he's showing all his old school dances. So I love when he busts that out. That's a thing that he routinely does with his character, and they're consistent. And it's good to see Grady, and Grady's excited. He hadn't seen Lamont since Lamont was a little kid, as he says. So they go to sit down and hang out, and then in comes the daughter. She comes in, and it's funny, even like I'm surprised on the show. I mean, it's the show, they're supposed to. But Fred and Lamont sit down without even waiting to see Betty Jean come in, and my son Samuel's watching it with me, and he's like, well, where's the daughter? And he's like, she's not even in there yet. And I'm like, she'll be in. So she comes in, and right away you see her and you don't think nothing of it, and then she pulls out the candy bar and she's like, man, I'm hungry. She's starving. She starts to try to eat the candy, and her mom, Margaret, she stops, and they meet. Her name's Betty Jean. And then that's when Fred's like, she's all, you know, I've been on a diet, I've lost 40 pounds, and I need, this is a dietetic candy bar, low cal. And Fred, of course, we know anytime in series history when Fred always goes, can I ask you a question? Something funny is about to pop up afterwards. So he's very nice, and Lamont's sitting next to him, and he's like, can I ask you a question? How long have you been on a diet, right? Because he's like, if you've lost weight now, you know, how big were you beforehand? It's very kind of rude, but he says it in a nice way. And then she says she's lost 40 pounds. And then she goes, the mom, Margaret, says, oh, she's part of a weight loss program where they meet once a week for once every 30 days. And Fred's like, well, what do you do in between? Eat for 30 straight days. so jacked up. And I like her response. Betty Jean sits down and she gives kind of those smirky remarks or looks like, you know what, man, I get it. I've heard all the jokes before. Yeah, that's nothing original. And she goes, oh no, we usually talk about what we didn't eat. And then Fred goes, that must be a short conversation. And even Grady's busted up laughing. Lamont and Fred are cracking up, but even her stepdad, Grady's dying, and his wife, Margaret, has to tell him to stop, you know, gain control. So they're like, hey, you know what? We have to go get something to eat for her. So we're going to go in the kitchen and get you guys something. Because she, you know, and that's true. No, you don't want to be rude. So they go in there, and then Fred Lamont, as we frequently see in show history, when they both want to go in there together, one of two things happen. They'll say, hey, we'll be right back. And they start shouting, and they're very loud, just like the one in Lamont Goes African and a dozen other ones. Or they go in and they start busting up together. And this is one where they go in cracking up together. And it's funny, the top 5 funny when Lamont's like, she said she lost 40 pounds. Fred's all, if she looked behind her, she'll find it. Oh my goodness. They get off a lot of zingers on this one where they're cracking up. And I love it when they're together busting up. And they say several other jokes to each other. And then they start to go, hey, you know, what are we going to do? We got to find something for her to eat. And Lamont's like, what are we going to give her? And Fred even says, he's like, a whale? So they open the closet and nothing's in there, or the cabinets, and they can't find anything. But they go back out to the living room, and you see the mom and dad. You know, they're talking, oh, that Lamont's a good-looking guy. You know, he's pretty good. What do you think, Betty Jean? And she's like, I bet he can't cook. And that's her number, and I don't blame her. That's her number one priority. We all have different priorities when we first meet someone we're attracted to, maybe even not attracted to, just someone you go, hey, would I have any interest in this one? Do they have a good job? Are they good looking? Are they in shape? Do they have a lot of friends? Are they personable? You know, all these things. And hers is, I want a good cook. And she's like, most good looking guys aren't. So we know she thinks he's good looking, but she wants someone who knows how to cook. And then she's like, well, he's got that nice mustache. It's too bushy. So she's not even into Lamont right now at this stage. But then you can see they're planting the seed, trying to get it. We go back to Fred. They can't find anything. He's like, hey, we'll go grocery shopping. Let's go to the store, and they can hang out here and get comfortable. Lamont's like, yeah, great idea. Then they come out, and as soon as they mention it, Betty Jean's like, ooh, I love grocery shopping, right? That's just like if I told my kids, hey, let's go to Toys R Us. Back when it was still around. Oh, they got it at Macy's now. But my kids would be all over. They'd be like, let's go, Dad, let's get in the car. Toys R Us, and then in and out afterwards. You know, they're excited. And that's how Betty Jean is. She's like, the grocery store is her toy store. So she wants to go, and Fred's like, oh, that's perfect. And I would never do this to my kids. Make it uncomfortable. And he's like, oh, that's perfect. You and Lamont can go to the grocery store, and I'll stay here and get comfortable and hang out with Grady and Margaret. And Lamont, rightfully so, was like, say what? You know, no, we're that's cool. And she's like, yeah, let's go. And then we can stop and get tacos. And she's all excited. She wants tacos. So Lamont's like, all right, I'll do it. You know, let's go. And she's like, oh, will we see any Mexicans? And because obviously she probably hasn't seen a bunch in her area where she lives. And Lamont's like, oh, trust me, the way we're going, the route he's taking, that's all we're going to see. He doesn't want any of his buddies seeing it. So they go. Fred's like, you know what? You can go freshen up, Margaret. Why don't you freshen up and go check your room and get everything situated, get comfortable. And that's a good idea, and she does. So it gives a chance for Grady and Fred to get to talk, and then they start chatting, and he's like, oh, Fred, oh, and it's so funny. Fred's like, oh, she's beautiful. You know, where'd you find someone like her? And he's like, oh, if you think she's pretty, wait till you see her sister. You know, if you see her sister. So beautiful family, and her daughter's beautiful. She's just bigger. She probably gets it from her dad's side. And look, Fred's like, well, why she is so, and he kind of pauses. He's like, large? He's all, nah. She's all plump? He's all, nah. That's the nice thing to say. And he's all fat. And Fred's all, now you got it. Fred is so openly honest and blunt. That's why I think his relationship with Julio was so funny, because he was so honest and Julio was so nice, and yet they were both going back and forth. So he says that, and he's like, yeah, and they don't know. It's something. And then they start talking about how she is going to get, if after her father passed away and left it, $10,000. And if she gets married, she doesn't get it till she gets married. And you see the gleam in Fred's eyes, right? Here's the 10,000. But even Grady's putting it, you know, and I love how Grady's acting like he doesn't. We already know they're pumping Lamont into Betty Jean's brain, and now he's pumping the cash into Fred's brain. Grady is the orchestrator of this whole thing. He knows everybody's button, and he's pushing everybody's button to get this. Like the A-Team used to say, I love it when a plan comes together. That's what Grady's probably thinking. So, and I wonder if Grady wants her to get the money and get out of the house. So it's just him and his wife, Margaret. So as they're sitting there, and then you see Fred, and he's like, yeah. He's like, and he goes, man, someone can use $10,000 to help with their business. I mean, you might as well just say, Fred, do you want that money? Get Lamont to marry her. And Fred's like, yeah, I can get a new truck. I can really fix this place up. How about Lamont? And he says it, and then Grady, of course, oh, I didn't even think about Lamont. That's a good, you think he'd go for it? Oh, we'll do it. So they come up with the plan to get it married. Lamont comes the next morning. So we get to the next day. Everything's set in motion. The next day, Fred is he looks all nice too. And Lamont's like, hey, why you dressed so nice? Oh, I'm entertaining some friends. I'm taking them out. You know how it is. And he's making Lamont's favorite breakfast, the steak and eggs. It's some special kind of steak and eggs to butter him up. And then he starts making a joke. Hey, I'm surprised there's any food after, you know, Betty Jean is here for the night. She didn't take it all. Fred says, you know, she's misunderstood. You know, she's a really good girl. That's unfair. And then Lamont's kind of like saying, look, giving him a weird look. And he goes, and Fred is trying to say it, and Lamont's kind of getting an idea. And he's like, you know what? She'd make a good girl to marry. And then Lamont just freezes. And he's all, would you think about marrying her, Lamont? And Lamont just like freezes. And then he looks at him, has this long pause, lets the audience set in the laughter. And then he says, have you been drinking Applejack this morning? Because he knows you just changed. You were completely on the other side, and now you're here. And Fred even has a great quote. He's all, love conquers all, even fat. And it's true, though. It is 100% true. But Lamont is not looking into this. And now he's talking about Lamont taking her out and going to get... And Lamont has nothing to do with this. And Fred, they're going to go. So they all get up, and they go out there, and they see Betty Jean. Or they come down, and they're ready to go. And Fred is trying to work it now, work his magic. Oh, you stay here, Betty Jean. Remember, she can't go because she doesn't like to walk a lot. And they mention why. I'm not going to get into it. But they don't like to walk a lot, and she's going to stay. So Fred's like, oh, that's perfect. You can stay here with Lamont. Lamont's like, starts trying to down his food to get the heck out of there. And they're like, you get together and we'll leave. And so they leave. And Lamont's like, oh, yeah, I got to go. And he's even sipping his coffee half a mile or 100 miles an hour. And she's trying to talk and she's trying to get a conversation. Not like she likes him, just to talk. And then they start to walk out and she's saying, oh, yeah, I want to do this. And Lamont keeps stopping. And then he keeps on. He's like, yeah. Oh, speaking of which, I got to go. And she's like, oh, I love to travel. I plan on doing traveling. He's like, oh, yeah, that's great. And she goes, and he says, you're going to need a husband who's got money, or a man who's got money. And she's like, oh, no, once I get married, I'll have myself $10,000 for getting married. And Lamont just freezes his tracks. And you want to think, no, did he freeze in his tracks because he wants the 10 grand? No, that's not Lamont. He's not thinking about the money. He just finds that fact interesting. And then he's got the gleam in his eye, the same as his dad, but it's for a different reason. There's something rotten in St. Louis, and he knows it's Fred. And he sits there and he's like, oh, yeah, you know, Betty Jean. And he says it angrily. He's like, you got to be real careful. There's some real old men and rotten old men who want to do something with your money. And he's so right. So he plays into it, and he wants to talk with her. And then Fred remember they come home, and Lamont's got the nice outfit on, and he's got the ripple. He's got the ripple in the bottle, or in the ice thing, almost like champagne, how you keep it in a bucket. And he sets it down. And that's when he tells him, you know what? We got some good news. He said, Betty Jean and I are getting married. Oh, everyone's celebrating. They're all excited. And they're like, oh, we're going to go talk to Betty Jean upstairs. And Fred and Grady are like, yeah, we got it. We got it. And so they head up there. Then Lamont starts telling him, yeah, you know, Dad, this is going to be good. They get it. And then they're taking sips to being married, you know, to parents, to grandparents, to starting a new life in St. Louis. And Fred just hits the brakes. He does not want, he never thought for a second Lamont would leave and go to St. Louis. He's like, no. And that's what he's like, what? And he's choking and coughing on it. And he's like, no, what are you can't go to St. Louis. And that's when Lamont's like, oh, I'm going to St. Louis, Pop. I got to start my life there, marry her. And that's when Fred's like, no, if this is it, I don't want you to get married. And he's like, well, there's nothing I can do now, Dad. I've already proposed, you know, we're going to get married. And he's like, and he says, I only did this because I thought it's what you wanted. This is genius by not just writing, but remember, when I talk like this, it's in a fictional perspective. So when I say that, yes, of course, it's all written in fake. But from Lamont's character, I think this is just as good as when he lets Fred meet Janet Lawson on his own. Remember that episode where he kind of sets it and then Fred gets comfortable on his own and doesn't overreact? This is where Lamont says, hey, I only did it for you, Dad. He didn't say, you know what, I found out you were just a rat. You just wanted the 10 grand. He didn't do any of that because that could cause problems. He actually took the right route and was like, hey, I only did it for you, Dad. I thought you wanted me to get married, start this family and move on, and I can do this now. And then Fred's like, well, if you're leaving to St. Louis, I don't want it. And he's like, well, okay, I won't marry her, Dad, but how are we going to get out of this? And he's all, leave it to me. Of course, we know Fred can stop anybody of getting married. So Lamont goes upstairs and they come down. And that's when he's like, oh, she even says, I don't know if maybe I should call you Dad or Pop, you know, because they're going to get married. That's when Fred's like, oh, this is going to be great. Everyone's excited. Then he says, the wedding cake. Remember, he says, oh, you haven't kissed her. And Fred's like, oh, I'll kiss her after the wedding. She's like, oh, we'll get you a big wedding cake. And she's getting excited for that. And Fred's like, oh, it's a shame you won't be able to eat it. And they're like, what? Why can't you eat the wedding cake? Lamont's putting you on a crash diet. He's really strict. When he put me on a diet, he chained me to the bed. I couldn't get up. Chained the refrigerator shut, and all I had was, what was it, like water and like some other diet food where it was like maybe rice cakes, something like that. He couldn't eat anything and to lose the weight. And he's like, yeah, he's gonna do that to you. He's not gonna chain you to the bed, but he'll probably have other measures. It paints such a horrible picture of Lamont as like this just intense guy, and she ain't having that. She's like, no, I'm not having that. And then she's like, forget this. And Margaret's even like, you know, go outside. And she's like, I'm sorry, Mr. Sanford. My daughter can't marry your son, not when it's like that. And Fred's like, you know, and Fred wisely, he says, you know what? It was just, he painted Lamont as kind of a bad guy, but more like he's doing it for her. And then Fred's like, you know, okay, you know, I get it. That's the way it is. You know, it's disappointing. And then he tells Grady, sorry, Grady, it just didn't work out. And they tell each other goodbye. So it's really good. I think Fred does a good job. They leave, then Lamont comes down and Fred's like, hey, we did it. You know, you're not getting married. I got you out of it. And Lamont's like, hey, you know, no problem. He's excited. And he never lets on about the 10 grand. And then I love the end right there where they finally, they laugh. They have a good laugh. They embrace. Right there, you can see how they're hugging. And it's legit. You know, he's so excited. He's going to have his son. His son's not leaving, and that's what he wants the most. And what I really like is when they hug, you can actually see Fred's must be whispering something because Lamont actually laughs for real. So I'm wondering what he said. I mean, he could have said anything like, hey, man, I just saved your butt. Joking around. I saved your butt from marrying her or whatever. It could have been 100 things. And I wish we could have known what he said. But it's a real hug. And I've covered before, and I'll always cover again, the actual love these two had for each other on the stage and also behind the scenes was just like, started like brothers, and then it became like a father figure, mentor, great relationship. So I love that ending. Then we get to the actual, you know, they cut away, and then they come back to the ending. And Fred says, hey, you know what, Bubba, I need you. Lamont's like, I got a date. He's like, no, don't go anywhere. I felt bad. You know, I made you miss your last date. So Bubba's niece is coming over right now, and I want you to meet Bubba's niece. Very nice lady. And he's like, no, look, I'm not doing it. I broke a date for family. I'm not breaking another date for this. No, you're not going to get it. And then all of a sudden she comes to the door, and it's, oh, what was her name? Let me get her name. Alberta. So Alberta comes, and she's beautiful. She's absolutely stunning. And Lamont's like, He's like, wait, okay, it's too late. And she comes in, and she's like, hi, Fred. And she talks to Fred, and he introduces her to Lamont. And she's very pretty and attractive. And Lamont's now is like, he wants to stay. And Fred's like, no, you got to go. I don't want you to break your date. And he pushes her out and closes the door. And then Fred's like, oh, let me go get something. He's going to get something to eat and drink for them, and they can relax. And she's sitting on the couch, ready to hang out. And you see Lamont, it cuts away to Lamont just looking inside. Looking inside the glass at the end, and he feels so bad. I'm sorry, unless Fred locked the door, I'm coming back in. Lamont should have at least said, okay, I'll meet her, and left it at that, but he ends up regretting it. But the good news is, in our fun facts, we'll talk about how Lamont does eventually meet up with her later in the future. So that's it for the episode. The Dowry has a lot of good moments, has some funny moments. I wouldn't say, the Dowry, it's one of the handful ones I watched the least. It's fun. Every episode, like I said, the 136th episode of Sanford & Son is better than a lot of garbage I've seen on TV now, or even other stuff in the past. But The Dowry would not be one of my wouldn't even be top 30. There are so many episodes I can think I like, but it's still really funny. We just covered it. There's a lot of good scenes, and I like the characters they have into it. So let's, without wasting time, get to the fun facts. Fun fact number 1, we get to meet Bubba's niece. I don't think there's any other time in show history, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, where we actually meet a family member of Bubba. We've met Grady's family, but of Bubba, and that is his niece, beautiful woman. This is one of 2 episodes, the first. There was 2 episodes that were written by Red Fox and Richard Pryor. Now, I've seen the other one, I can't remember which one it is, but I always see his name in the post-credits, Richard Pryor. You'll see that in a couple of them. But Red Fox and Richard Pryor wrote this episode. I wonder if any of this is from actual personal experience. Could be. But very funny story right there that, yeah, they did. I did not know that. Albert Reed and, the actor who plays Grady in this one. What's his name? Albert Reed. So Albert Reed and Margaret Ray. That's the 2 who played Grady and Margaret in this one. They actually went on in 1979, so 7 years later. 7 years later, they went on to play husband and wife again in Good Times. So how ironic is that they're husband and wife in this, and then in a completely different show about 6 or 7 years later, they're husband and wife again. I wonder if their names were the same. That would be ironic. So almost like like in Marvel, where they have the universe all together, you would have different sitcom universes all together. Good Times, where they could have been like, hey, I know I know Fred Sanford. That's funny right there. And then the 10,000, right? You get 10,000. When I hear that, I go, wow, that's a lot. But not nowadays. 10,000 then to now with the equivalency is to $71,571.77. So right now, if Lamont was to marry her today, he would be getting $71,571.77. That is a lot of money. You could do something with that. I think you could probably buy more cars with 10 grand then than you could with 77 grand now. But still, that's a pretty cool fact. I did not know that as well. And let's get to our last part of the show, familiar faces. And of course, Albert Reed, who plays Grady, Cousin Grady in this, he was in the movie Airport. He went in a movie called Where Does It Hurt? 3 for the Road, and Chase. I've seen him in a few other things, probably Airport. I've seen Airport, but I've seen him in a few other things. And we just mentioned he was in Good Times as well. He might have been in other episodes as well, but those are the ones right there. Margaret Ray. We know Margaret Ray. She goes on to be in the episode where she is a call girl, and Fred comes over and she wants to move into Sanford Arms. And Fred's like, Esther comes in. She's like, this is a fallen woman. And Fred's like, I'm trying to break her fall. and Grady, Esther ends up taking her away, saying we need to get her saved, taking her to the Reverend and get her to repent from this life. But she also comes back as Eve in the great show Sanford. And that's Fred's love interest in that. And it's funny, I think in Sanford as Eve, she looks younger and prettier than she does in this. Nothing bad, but she looks so much more glowing and younger and healthier about 8 or 9 years later in the show Sanford. But I always liked Eve more than Donna. I'm alone in that. I put a poll on our channel and most still like Donna, but I've always liked Eve more than Donna. Something about her. Looks and attitude, always positive. But yeah, she was also in The Young and the Restless. Now, she did soap operas, and I could see that because I think she has a very serious face, attractive, and can be serious roles and play more sophisticated stuff. She was in Dynasty, makes sense. The Bill Cosby Show, and she was also in, this is kind of out of left field, and I watched this show a few times, The Flash. the sitcom Superhero 1 on Channel 5 back before superheroes are what they are now. So she was in those. Interesting. Betty Jean was played by Gladys Penny. Or no, it's Perry, I'm sorry. Without my glasses, sometimes I don't see as well. Gladys Perry. She played Betty Jean. I don't see her when I look her up in any other show. You know what she first starred in? She went on to this, I think, after 1974. She was in Match Game 74 as a contestant. That's random to say, hey, I'm an actress. I was in an episode of Sanford & Son where the viewers are like 15 to 16 million per episode, and now I'm on Match Game 74. But that's the only other thing that's listed in her, so just in case you didn't know. And finally, we get to Kathy McKee. That is the beautiful one who played Alberta, Bubba's cousin. She was also in something called Quantum. Policewoman. Hey, we've talked about Policewoman in our previous episodes before. She was in Policewoman. She was an uncredited background lady in an episode in 1975 of Saturday Night Live. So she got to be a background on Saturday Night Live. She also was host, LA Morning Talk Show host. She hosted her own talk show, one of the members of it. And you can see why. She's a very pretty woman. And she was Cousin Lorraine. Remember we talked about how, don't worry, Lamont, he'll get a second chance with her. In the episode with Cousin Emma, and Grady's taking over for Fred in that time. He's saying there, Cousin Emma comes at the end. Lamont's like, oh, I want you to meet my cousin Lorraine. And Grady's like, what? He's like, well, you got a cousin coming over? I can have a cousin. And then he makes out with her, and Grady's like, hey, she ain't your cousin. If you get a cousin like that, I want a cousin like her too. So great episode, and she's very attractive, like I said, in that. So she does make a second appearance in Sanford & Son. Beautiful lady. And that's our familiar faces. That's everything. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This one, to me, was a good episode. As I said, I didn't get as many top 5 funny. I brought out the top 5 funny moments, but there were none that made me die laughing. I would just be like, oh, that is good. It had laughs throughout the episode, but nothing that just blew me out of the water like some of them. Like next week's episode, which I am so excited for. We're going to see Osgood. Be of good cheer. Osgood is here. I cannot wait. I'm going to have a blast. I'm probably going to be dying laughing. I'll be wiping tears away. This episode is like, humor-wise, 1 through 10, probably like a 5. That is a 10. That is a breaking the scale 10 next week. So be sure to be here next week when we watch, and Friday for our Friday Fun Facts. But Tuesday when we break down the episode with Osgood the Patient. Thank you very much, guys. Continue to like, continue to subscribe, and comment anything you want, and request anything you want as well. And look for me on Twitter. I am at Red G Fox on Twitter. You can talk to me anytime you want as well there. We always put stuff on that channel as well. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good day. Peace.